The moment I received that photo of my newborn granddaughter through a stranger's Facebook message, something inside me shattered. My own son, Michael, had made sure I would never hold little Sophia in my arms. He'd blocked my number, changed their address, and instructed the hospital staff not to let me in. But what truly broke me wasn't just being denied access to my first grandchild. It was the sudden, crushing realization that I'd spent 30 years being the devoted mother only to end up a stranger to my own family. I never imagined that standing up for myself would cost me everything, or that losing everything would finally set me free. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I suppose to understand how things fell apart, you need to know who I was before everything changed. My name is Margaret Wilson, Maggie to my friends, though they were few and far between by the time this story begins. For most of my adult life, I defined myself through one role: mother. I married young, had Michael at 23 and his sister Ellie 2 years later. Their father, Richard, worked as an insurance adjuster, which meant long hours and frequent business trips. The arrangement was simple. He provided financially, and I handled everything else. Everything else meant precisely that. The cooking, the cleaning, the doctor appointments, the school projects, the emotional support, the birthday parties, the holiday gatherings. All of it fell to me, and I embraced it wholeheartedly. I was raised to believe that motherhood was a woman's highest calling, a sacred duty that demanded complete selflessness. My own mother had drummed this into me from childhood. A good mother always puts her children first. Our modest home in Pinecrest, a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio, became the center of our children's universe. I volunteered at their schools, chaired the PTA, coached Ellie's softball team, and never missed a single one of Michael's debate tournaments. When Michael showed an aptitude for science, I took night courses in chemistry so I could help with his homework. When Ellie struggled with reading, I spent hours researching teaching methods for dyslexia. My children's needs always came first. My own interests perpetually shelved for someday. When Richard's drinking problem began to surface, I shielded the children from it. When his verbal abuse turned occasionally physical, I made excuses. Daddy's just stressed from work, I would say, covering bruises with long sleeves and foundation. I stayed because that's what mothers did. They endured, they sacrificed, they protected their children at all costs. Divorce was unthinkable. What would happen to Michael and Ellie's stability, their sense of family? So I weathered the storms, believing my endurance was an act of love. The day Richard wrapped his car around a telephone pole with his secretary in the passenger seat was the day my illusions should have shattered. He survived with minor injuries. She didn't. The scandal rocked our small community, but even then, I focused on protecting my children from the whispers and stares. Michael was 16, Ellie 14. We'll get through this together, I promised. Them swallowing my own humiliation and grief. Richard moved out, leaving us with a mountain of debt I hadn't known existed. Our family home was mortgaged to the hilt, credit cards maxed out, savings depleted. At 41, with a high school, education, and no work experience beyond a brief stint as a bank teller before marriage, I faced financial ruin. Those were dark days. I took 2 jobs, receptionist at a dental office during the day, waitressing at night. I sold everything of value, moved us to a cramped apartment, and learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. Michael and Ellie had to grow up fast, taking on household responsibilities while I worked 60-hour weeks. The resentment began then, I think, though I didn't recognize it at the time. They'd lost not just their father, but the comfortable life they'd known. And in many ways, they lost me too. Physically present, but perpetually exhausted. Still, we survived. More than that, we eventually thrived. I went back to school, taking night classes until I earned my associate's degree in business administration. I climbed from receptionist to office manager, then to administrative director. By the time Michael headed to college, a prestigious university with a scholarship covering most costs, I had rebuilt our life. I took immense pride in Michael's accomplishments. Brilliant, ambitious, disciplined, he excelled in ways that made my sacrifices feel worthwhile. While Ellie took a more circuitous path, eventually finding her passion in graphic design, Michael marched straight toward his goals: top of his class, medical school, surgical residency. I cheered from the sidelines, working extra hours to help with books, housing, whatever gaps his scholarship didn't cover. "You don't have to do this, Mom," he would say. "I can take out loans." "Absolutely not," I'd insist. "You focus on your studies. I'll handle the rest." Those were the days when Michael still called regularly, when he still needed me. He would phone late at night after grueling hospital shifts, his voice raw with exhaustion or frustration or self-doubt. I would listen, encourage, reassure. "You were made for this," I'd tell him. "Your hands were meant to heal." The subtle shift began during his final year of residency when he met Amanda. Beautiful, accomplished Amanda, with her own medical degree and family connections that opened doors Michael had only dreamed of. Her parents were both physicians, her father a department chair, her mother a renowned researcher. Next to them, what was I? A middle-aged woman with an associate's degree, working in dental office administration. I spent that night alternating between sobbing and staring numbly at the wall. By morning, grief had hardened into something else: determination. I would not be erased from my granddaughter's life without a fight. My first step was reaching out to Ellie. She had always been the more level-headed of my children, less susceptible to outside influence. Unlike Michael, who craved approval and validation, Ellie had an inner compass that rarely wavered. "He said what?" she demanded, her voice sharp with disbelief when I told her about Michael's call. "That's absolute garbage, Mom. You're not emotionally volatile. You're the most stable person I know." "He says I'm too involved, too pushy," I explained, my voice still raw from crying. "That I don't respect boundaries." Ellie snorted. "The only boundary you've crossed is expecting basic human decency from your own son. This isn't about you, Mom. It's about Amanda and her family. They've been isolating Michael from day one." "What should I do?" I asked, desperate for guidance. "I can't just accept this. Sophia is my granddaughter." "Give me a few days," Ellie said. "Let me talk to Michael. Maybe he'll listen to me." I waited, hope flickering like a fragile flame. 3 days later, Ellie called back, her voice tight with anger. "He refused to discuss it," she said. "Just kept repeating the same talking points about boundaries and family units. I've never heard him sound so rehearsed, like he was reciting lines someone else wrote for him." "Amanda," I said quietly. "Or her mother," Ellie agreed. "Either way, he's completely under their influence. He even had the nerve to suggest I should examine my own attachment issues for defending you." The flame of hope guttered but didn't quite die. "What about legal options?" I asked. "Don't grandparents have rights?" "It varies by state," Ellie said cautiously. "I can look into it for you." The research wasn't encouraging. Ohio's grandparent visitation laws were limited. I would need to prove that visitation was in Sophia's best interest, and without any existing relationship, since I'd never even been allowed to meet her, that would be nearly impossible. Besides, the thought of dragging my son into court made me physically ill. What kind of relationship could we salvage after that? Still, I couldn't simply give up. I wrote Michael a long email, pouring out my heart, acknowledging that perhaps I had been too eager, too insistent. I promised to respect whatever boundaries they set, if only they would allow me some role, however small, in Sophia's life. No. Response. I sent a carefully selected gift for Sophia's 1-month birthday, a silver rattle engraved with her name, similar to the ones I'd seen Amanda admiring at her shower. The package was returned unopened with "Refused" stamped across the label. Each rebuff was a knife to my heart, but I kept trying. Birthday cards, holiday greetings, always gentle, always without demands or recriminations. Each one met with silence. Then came the Facebook message that changed everything. It appeared in my message requests folder from someone named Deborah Lynn. I didn't recognize the name, but the message preview mentioned Michael, so I opened it immediately. "Mrs. Wilson, you don't know me, but I'm a nurse at Riverside Community Hospital where your son works. I've wanted to reach out for months, ever since I overheard a conversation between him and his wife about keeping you from your granddaughter." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I have a difficult relationship with my own mother, so initially I didn't want to interfere. But yesterday, I was working in the pediatric unit when Dr. Andrews brought his daughter in for a routine checkup, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. That little girl deserves to know her grandmother. I'm attaching a photo I took when they weren't looking. I'm sorry if this crosses a line, but I believe you have a right to at least see your granddaughter. Below was a slightly blurry photo of a beautiful baby girl with Michael's eyes and dark curls, sitting on an exam table in a frilly pink dress. Sophia, my granddaughter. Seeing her face for the first time, I felt a rush of love so powerful, it took my breath away. I stared at the photo for hours, memorizing every detail of her tiny face. I wrote back to Deborah, pouring out my gratitude, asking if she could tell me anything else about Sophia. Was she happy? Healthy? Did she smile? Easily? Did she sleep through the night? Deborah responded with gentle kindness, sharing what little she knew. She seems to be a perfectly healthy baby, right on track developmentally. Very alert and curious. Your son is clearly a devoted father. He knows all her routines and preferences. At least there was that. Whatever else Michael had become, he was a good father. I found strange comfort in that knowledge. For a week, I contented myself with that single photo, that small glimpse into my granddaughter's life. Then another message arrived from Deborah. Dr. Andrews mentioned they're attending the hospital's summer picnic this Saturday. It's open to staff families and community members who've donated to the pediatric unit. I noticed your name on the donor list from last year. It was true. I'd made a modest donation to the hospital's pediatric cancer fund after one of our dental patients, a young boy, had been treated there. I had completely forgotten about it. The picnic is at Riverside Park from 12:4, Deborah continued. I thought you should know. My heart raced as I considered the implications. A chance to see Sophia in person, maybe even an opportunity to speak with Michael in a public setting where he'd be less likely to create a scene. It felt like a sign, a door cracking open after months of solid walls. But doubt crept in just as quickly. What if my presence angered Michael further? What if it only reinforced his belief that I couldn't respect boundaries? What if it destroyed any chance of eventual reconciliation? I called Ellie again, seeking her counsel. I think you should go, she said, after listening to my dilemma. Not to confront Michael or demand anything, but just to be present, to show him you're not going away, that you're still his mother and Sophia's grandmother, regardless of how he's treating you. What if he refuses to speak to me? Or worse, what if he makes a scene? Then you'll have your answer about whether this relationship can be salvaged, Ellie said bluntly. But Mom, you need to prepare yourself. Based on how he's been acting, I wouldn't expect a warm welcome. The day of the picnic dawned bright and clear, a perfect June Saturday. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on a simple sundress in a shade of blue that Michael had once said brought out my eyes. I styled my hair, applied makeup carefully, wanting to look my best, not to impress Amanda's family, but to show Michael that I was still the mother he had once loved and respected. I arrived at the park early, heart pounding so hard I felt lightheaded. The hospital had set up a large pavilion with food, games for children, and information booths about their various programs. I made a donation at the entrance, received my name tag, and found a bench with a good view of the main area, and then I waited, scanning each arriving family, my stomach clenching every time I spotted a stroller or infant carrier. An hour passed, then another. Had Deborah been mistaken, or had plans changed? Just as I was beginning to lose hope, I saw them, Michael pushing a stroller, Amanda beside him in a flowing summer dress, her parents trailing behind. They looked like a picture from a magazine, the perfect young family enjoying a perfect summer day. I watched as they greeted colleagues, Amanda lifting Sophia from the stroller to show her off, Caroline hovering nearby, ever the proud grandmother. Sophia had grown since the photo. Her dark curls had thickened, and she was more alert, taking in the scene with curious eyes, Michael's eyes. She wore a little white sun hat and a yellow dress with tiny embroidered daisies. My hands ached with the need to hold her, to feel her weight in my arms, to whisper all the love stored in my heart. I stood up, legs trembling, and began walking toward them. 20 feet away. 15. 10. Amanda saw me first. Her smile froze, eyes widening in alarm. She clutched Sophia tighter and quickly leaned toward Michael, speaking urgently into his ear. He turned, saw me, and his face hardened into a mask I didn't recognize. He handed Sophia to Amanda and strode toward me, intercepting me before I could reach them. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, voice low but vibrating with anger. "I made a donation to the pediatric unit last year," I explained, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I received an invitation to the picnic." "This isn't a coincidence," he accused. "You're stalking us now?" The unfairness of it stung like a slap. "I'm not stalking anyone, Michael. I'm attending a public event that I was invited to." "How did you even know we'd be here?" he pressed. I hesitated, not wanting to get Deborah in trouble. "It doesn't matter. I just wanted to see my granddaughter. Even from a distance. Please, Michael, just let me meet her once." His expression didn't soften. "We've been through this, Mom. The answer is no." "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What have I done that's so terrible you'd keep your own mother from knowing her grandchild?" Michael glanced over his shoulder. Amanda was watching us, her face tight with disapproval. Caroline had moved protectively closer to them, one hand on Sophia's back. "This isn't the time or place," he said flatly. "You need to leave." "Michael, please." "No?" His voice was cold, final. "If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have security escort you out." I looked past him to where Amanda stood with Sophia. The baby was watching us curiously, one tiny hand fisted in her mother's hair. So close, yet completely unreachable. "She has your eyes," I said softly. Something flickered across Michael's face, a momentary softening, a glimpse of the sun I'd raised. Then it was gone, replaced by that same cold mask. "Goodbye, Mom," he said, turning away. I watched him rejoin his family, watched Amanda's relieved smile, Caroline's triumphant glance in my direction. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to process the finality of that dismissal. A security guard approached, summoned by someone. Michael? Amanda? Caroline? It didn't matter. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I need to ask you to move along." I nodded numbly and allowed him to escort me back to my car. I sat behind the wheel, keys in my hand, tears streaming down my face, unable to drive, unable to think beyond the crushing weight of rejection. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I glanced at it, expecting spam, but froze when I saw the content. A photo of Sophia, clearly taken just minutes ago at the picnic, her little face alight with curiosity, as she reached for a butterfly that had landed nearby. Beneath it, a message. "I'm so sorry. She deserves to know you. DL Deborah." Somehow, in the midst of everything, she had managed to capture this moment for me. A small, precious gift amidst so much pain. I drove home in a fog, the photo my only comfort. I forwarded it to Ellie, who called immediately. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said when I described what had happened. "Michael is being completely unreasonable." "It's over, Ellie," I said, my voice hollow. "He's made his choice. I can't keep doing this to myself." "So what now?" she asked. "You're just giving up?" "Not giving up," I corrected. "Accepting reality. Michael doesn't want me in Sophia's life. Nothing I do or say is going to change that." "This isn't like you," Ellie said, concerned. "You've never backed down from a fight, especially not when it comes to family." "Maybe that's been the problem all along," I replied. "Maybe I fought too hard, held on too tight. Maybe it's time I learned to let go." After we hung up, I sat in my silent apartment, surrounded by photos of a life that no longer existed. Michael's graduation, his wedding day, moments when I'd believed our bond was unbreakable. The pain was physical, a constant pressure in my chest that made it hard to breathe. That night I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out a notebook and began to write, pouring out years of unspoken feelings. I wrote about the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given, the dreams I'd abandoned for my children's sake. I wrote about the growing distance with Michael, the subtle and not-so-subtle ways Amanda and her family had pushed me out. I wrote about Sophia, the granddaughter I might never know. By morning, I had filled pages, but strangely, I felt lighter. Seeing it all laid out in black and white brought a clarity I'd been lacking. The truth was stark, but undeniable. I had defined myself solely as Michael's mother for so long that I had no identity beyond that role. And now that he had rejected that relationship, I was adrift, purposeless. Who was Margaret Wilson when not? Serving as mother, provider, supporter? I honestly didn't know. The realization was terrifying, but also strangely liberating. If I was no longer defined by my relationship to Michael, then I was free to define myself on my own terms. Free to discover what I wanted, what brought me joy, what purpose might fill the gaping hole in my life. It wasn't a lightning bolt epiphany. There was no sudden transformation from grieving mother to empowered woman. The pain remained, a constant companion. But alongside it grew something new, curiosity. What might my life look like if I built it around my own needs and desires? I started small. That weekend, instead of spending Sunday cleaning my apartment and meal prepping for the week as I always did, I drove to a nearby state park and went hiking for the first time in decades. The trail was challenging, my muscles protesting the unaccustomed exercise, but the quiet beauty of the forest soothed something raw within me. I sat beside a stream, listening to water tumbling over rocks, and felt a moment of peace so profound it brought tears to my eyes. The following Saturday, I visited a community art center that offered classes for beginners. I signed up for watercolor painting, something I'd always admired but never attempted. My first efforts were laughably bad, but the instructor was encouraging. And the process itself, learning to see shapes and colors differently, to translate vision to paper, absorbed me completely for hours. Weeks passed. I established new routines. Work still occupied most of my weekdays, but evenings and weekends became mine in a way they'd never been before. I joined a book club, started taking my lunch breaks in the park instead of at my desk, bought theater tickets for performances I'd always wanted to see but never made time for. None of it filled the Sophia-shaped hole in my heart. I still thought of her constantly, still wondered what milestone she was reaching, still ached to be part of her life. But the crushing despair began to recede, replaced by a dull, manageable, and increasingly by moments of genuine engagement with my new activities. Then came another message from Deborah Lynn. Dr. Andrews mentioned they're taking a family vacation next month, 2 weeks in Florida. Thought you might want to know they'll be away from home. I stared at the message, unsure what response she expected. Did she think I would break into their house? Stalk them in Florida? I was about to delete it when a new thought occurred to me. 2 weeks without Michael and Amanda in town meant 2 weeks when I could speak freely to mutual acquaintances without fear of it getting back to them. I had maintained my dignity throughout this ordeal, never speaking ill of Michael or Amanda to friends or colleagues. But that silence had come at a cost. Isolation. I had withdrawn from social circles we shared, afraid of awkward questions or worse, of hearing about Sophia secondhand. But what if I used these 2 weeks to reconnect? Not to gossip or complain, but simply to reclaim relationships that had been important to me? Particularly with Dr. James Foster, Michael's mentor during residency, and one of the few people whose opinion Michael truly valued. Dr. Foster had always been kind to me, appreciative of my support during Michael's grueling training years. We had lost touch after Michael's wedding, but I still had his contact information. Before I could overthink it, I composed an email. Dear James, it's been too long since we've caught up. I've been thinking about you and wondering how you're doing. Would you have time for coffee in the next couple of weeks? I'd love to hear about your latest research and share some news of my own. He responded within hours, warm and enthusiastic, suggesting we meet the following Tuesday at a cafe near the hospital. I spent the intervening days vacillating between anticipation and anxiety. What exactly did I hope to accomplish? I wasn't going to ask him to intervene with Michael. That would be inappropriate and likely counterproductive. But perhaps, if the conversation turned naturally in that direction, I might gain some insight into my son's thinking. Tuesday arrived, and with it, a surge of nervousness that nearly had me canceling. But I forced myself to go, dressed carefully in professional attire, and arrived 5 minutes early. Dr. Foster was already there, silver-haired and distinguished as ever, rising to greet me with genuine warmth. Margaret, wonderful to see you. You're looking well. The pleasantries flowed easily, updates on his research, my work at the dental practice, mutual acquaintances. He asked about Ellie, and I shared her latest graphic design achievements with maternal pride. Then, inevitably, the conversation turned to Michael. I haven't seen much of him lately outside of professional contexts, Dr. Foster remarked. How is fatherhood treating him? I understand he has a daughter now. I hesitated, then decided on honesty without bitterness. Yes, Sophia. She's 7 months old now. Beautiful girl. Michael seems to be thriving as a father from what I can tell. Dr. Foster's eyebrows rose slightly. From what you can tell, I would have thought you'd be a regular fixture in their household, Margaret. You were always such a devoted mother. The opening was perfect, and yet I nearly chickened out. But something pushed me forward. Perhaps the genuine concern in his eyes, or simply the accumulation of months of silent suffering. Actually, James, I've never met Sophia, I said quietly. Michael and Amanda have limited outside involvement with the baby. Their decision, of course. He frowned, clearly surprised. Never met her? That seems unusual, especially given how close you and Michael have always been. We were close, I agreed, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. Things changed after he married Amanda. More significantly after Sophia was born. They've made it clear they don't want me involved in their family life. Dr. Foster's frown deepened. I'm sorry to hear that, Margaret. Very sorry indeed. Have they given you any explanation? Michael says I'm emotionally volatile and don't respect boundaries, I replied, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Neither of which has any basis in reality, but it's what he believes, or what he's been convinced to believe. He studied me thoughtfully. This doesn't sound like the Michael I know. The young man I mentored was compassionate, thoughtful, deeply connected to his family, particularly you. I've spent months trying to understand it, I admitted. The only conclusion I can reach is that Amanda and her family have influenced him significantly. They're very controlling of access to Sophia. Dr. Foster sipped his coffee, his expression troubled. This does align with some observations I've made professionally. Michael has become increasingly isolated, declining social invitations, avoiding conversations about his personal life. Several colleagues have commented on the change. Hope flickered within me. Do you think? Would it make any difference if you spoke to him? Not on my behalf exactly, but perhaps expressed concern about his withdrawal from his support network. Dr. Foster considered this carefully. I could certainly try, though I'd need to approach it delicately. Michael has always respected my opinion, but he's also fiercely protective of his autonomy. If he senses manipulation, it could backfire. I understand, I said quickly. And I wouldn't want to put you in an awkward position. It's just that I've tried everything I can think of, and nothing has made a difference. He reached across the table and patted my hand, his expression kind. Let me think about the best approach. In the meantime, Margaret, how are you coping with all this? The simple question, asked with genuine concern, nearly undid me. I blinked back sudden tears. It's been challenging, I admitted. But I'm trying to focus on building a life that isn't centered solely around being Michael's mother. Taking art classes, hiking, making new friends. Good for you, he said warmly. Our children are precious to us, but they can't be our entire world, especially when they're adults making their own choices, however misguided those might be. We finished our coffee, promised to stay in touch, and parted with a hug. I walked back to my car feeling lighter than I had in months. Not because I expected Dr. Foster to work miracles, but because for the first time, someone who knew Michael well had validated my experience. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't emotionally volatile. Something was genuinely wrong with the situation. A week passed with no word from Dr. Foster. I tried not to obsess over whether he'd spoken to Michael, what might have been said, what impact it might have. Instead, I focused on my expanding world, a weekend photography workshop that awakened, a new passion, a community garden plot I'd rented on impulse, the growing circle of friends from my various activities. Then, 10 days after our coffee meeting, my phone rang with Michael's number. My heart leapt into my throat as I answered. Michael? Mom? His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk about what you've been doing. What have you been saying to Dr. Foster? Michael demanded, his voice cold and accusatory. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't expected my coffee with James to reach Michael so quickly, or to provoke such a reaction. We had coffee and caught up, I replied carefully. He's an old friend, Michael. Don't play innocent, he snapped. He came to me with concerns about my isolation and family dynamics. Those aren't his words. They're yours. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. I didn't ask him to speak to you on my behalf, if that's what you're implying. We had an honest conversation about our lives. He asked about you and Sophia, and I told him the truth, that I've never been allowed to meet my granddaughter. You had no right, Michael hissed. My relationship with my mentors is professional. You've compromised that by dragging your personal grievances into my workplace. The unfairness of this accusation stung like a physical blow. Your personal grievances? Is that what you call cutting your mother out of your life without explanation? Denying me any contact with my grandchild? This is exactly why Amanda. And I made our decision, he retorted. You're incapable of respecting boundaries. Everything is about your feelings, your rights, what you want. That's not true, and you know it, I said, my composure finally cracking. I've spent my entire life putting your needs first. Everything I did, working multiple jobs, going back to school, sacrificing any semblance of a personal life, was for you and Ellie. I never complained, never asked for recognition. I was proud to do it because I love you. If you loved me, Michael said coldly, you'd respect my decisions about my family instead of trying to manipulate the situation through my colleagues. I wasn't manipulating anything. I had coffee with a friend who happened to ask about you. Was I supposed to lie? You were supposed to keep your resentments to yourself instead of poisoning my professional relationships. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. This wasn't the son I'd raised, this cold, judgmental man who twisted every action into something sinister. Michael, I said quietly, what happened to you? When did you become someone who could treat his mother this way? There was a long silence. For a moment, I thought I'd reached him, broken through whatever wall had been erected between us. Then he spoke, his voice distant and formal. I need to make something absolutely clear. Any further attempts to involve yourself in my life or my family's life will result in a complete severance of our relationship. No contact, no updates, nothing. If you continue trying to circumvent the boundaries we've set, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. Do I make myself clear? The threat left me breathless. Legal action? For what? Talking to a friend? Sending birthday cards that you return unopened? What exactly are you accusing me of? Harassment, he said flatly. Emotional manipulation. Attempting to damage my professional reputation. Michael, listen to yourself, I pleaded. This isn't you? You've always been kind, compassionate. What's happened to make you so cruel? Nothing's happened except that I've grown up and established healthy boundaries with a parent who refuses to respect my autonomy. Amanda sees it clearly, even if you don't. The mention of Amanda confirmed what I'd suspected all along. This coldness, these accusations, they weren't coming from my son. They were being fed to him by someone who wanted me gone. I understand, I said finally, my voice hollow. You've made your position clear. I won't contact you again. I hung up before he could respond, before he could hear the sob that tore from my throat. This was it, then. The final nail in the coffin of our relationship. No more hope. No more trying. No more imagining a future where I knew my granddaughter. The pain was visceral, a physical ache that radiated from my chest throughout my body. I curled up on my bed, clutching a pillow to my stomach, and gave myself permission to break completely. Hours passed in a fog of grief so profound it felt like drowning. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me. I fell into a fitful sleep and dreamed of Michael as a little boy, his small hand in mine as we walked through a park. I love you to the moon and back, Mommy, he said, looking up at me with trust and adoration. I woke with tears still wet on my face. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. I couldn't face people, couldn't summon the energy to pretend I was functional when I felt shattered beyond repair. I spent the day in a daze, moving from bed to couch and back again, unable to eat, unable to focus on anything beyond the gaping wound where my relationship with my son had been. By evening, concerned texts from Ellie began appearing on my phone. I'd missed our usual morning check-in, and she was worried. I sent a brief reply. Michael called. It's over. Need time. She called immediately, but I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't talk about it yet. Couldn't find words to describe the finality of Michael's rejection. The following day was marginally better in that I managed to shower and eat a piece of toast. I called my supervisor and explained I had a family emergency, requesting the rest of the week off. She was understanding. I'd rarely used my accumulated sick days. On the third day, the doorbell rang. I ignored it, but whoever it was persisted, ringing again and again. Finally, I dragged myself to the door, not bothering to check my appearance. What did it matter? Ellie stood on my doorstep, her expression shifting from frustration to shock as she took in my disheveled state. "Mom," she breathed, stepping forward to embrace me. "Oh, Mom." I collapsed into her arms, fresh tears coming at the simple comfort of human contact. She guided me back inside, sat me on the couch, and went to the kitchen to make tea. I heard her opening cupboards, running water, moving around my space with the familiarity of a daughter who knows her mother's home. She returned with 2 steaming mugs and sat beside me, her face etched with concern. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Your texts were so cryptic." Haltingly, I explained about my coffee with Dr. Foster, Michael's angry call, his threats of legal action. Ellie listened, her expression darkening with each detail. "That absolute jerk," she muttered when I finished. "He's completely out of line. You didn't do anything wrong." "It doesn't matter," I said wearily. "He's made his decision. I've lost him, Ellie. And Sophia, too." "No." She sat up straighter, a determined glint in her eye. "No, I refuse to accept that. This isn't over." "It is," I insisted. "You didn't hear him, Ellie. He's completely convinced I'm some kind of manipulative monster trying to damage his life. Nothing I say or do is going to change that." "Then we don't try to change his mind," she said firmly. "We change your situation instead." I blinked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Mom, look at yourself. You've put your entire life on hold while you wait for Michael to come around. You've been existing, not living. And for what? So you can sit by the phone hoping he'll call? So you can send cards that get returned unopened? This isn't healthy." Her words stung because they were true. I had been in a holding pattern, unable to move forward, unwilling to accept that my relationship with Michael might be permanently severed. "What else am I supposed to do?" I asked. "Live," Ellie said simply. "Really live. Create a life so full and rich that Michael's absence, while painful, isn't devastating. Show him, show yourself, that you're more than just his mother." The concept was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Who was I if not Michael's mother? What identity did I have beyond the roles that had defined me for so long? "I wouldn't even know where to start," I admitted. "Well, for one thing, you could take that early retirement package your company offered last year," Ellie suggested. "The one you turned down because you thought you'd need to be available to help with Sophia." I'd almost forgotten about that. The dental practice had been acquired by a larger medical group, and they'd offered generous early retirement packages to longer-term employees who were within 5 years of retirement age. I'd declined, reasoning that I'd need my full income and flexible schedule when I eventually became part of Sophia's life. "I don't know if the offer is still available," I said dubiously. "It can't hurt to ask," Ellie pointed out. "And if it is, you could use that money to do something you've always wanted to do: travel, move somewhere new, go back to school." The ideas were so outside my realm of consideration that they felt almost absurd. And yet, hadn't I been taking small steps in that direction already? The hiking, the art classes, the community garden, all attempts to build a life that wasn't centered solely around my children. "I'll think about it," I promised. Ellie stayed with me for 3 days, coaxing me to eat, drawing me out of the apartment for short walks, gently but persistently pushing me to consider a future beyond my current grief. By the time she left, I felt stronger, not healed, but no longer drowning. The following Monday, I returned to work and requested a meeting with my supervisor. The early retirement package was indeed still available, though the terms had changed slightly. I took the information home to review, promising a decision within the week. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, making 2 columns: reasons to stay and reasons to go. Under stay, I listed financial security, familiarity, healthcare benefits. Under go, I wrote freedom, fresh start, opportunity to reinvent myself. The list grew over several days as I considered angles I hadn't initially thought of. Under stay, I added proximity to Michael and Sophia. Even if they wanted nothing to do with me, there was comfort in knowing they were nearby. Under go, I noted distance from painful reminders, chance to heal without constant hope and disappointment. By Friday, the go column was twice as long as stay. I called my supervisor and accepted the retirement package. The decision, once made, unleashed a cascade of others. If I was leaving my job, did I want to stay in Columbus? The cost of living was reasonable. I had friends and my community garden plot and the beginning of a social life. But I also had constant reminders of Michael, the perpetual possibility of running into him or Amanda or Caroline in the grocery store or at a restaurant. Ellie, true to form, had strong opinions. "Come to Seattle," she urged during our evening call. "The weather's not great, but the city is amazing. There's so much culture, incredible food, outdoor activities everywhere. You'd love it." "I'd be imposing on your life," I objected. "You're young, you have your career, your friends. You don't need your mother underfoot." "I'm not suggesting you move in with me," she laughed. "Just that you consider Seattle as an option. I could help you get settled, introduce you to people. Plus, selfishly, I'd love to have you closer than half a country away." I promised to consider it, though in truth, Seattle wasn't at the top of my list. I'd visited Ellie there several times and found the city beautiful but overwhelming. Too much traffic, too many people, too expensive. I was looking for something quieter, a place where I could stretch my retirement savings further. The answer came from an unexpected source. My watercolor instructor, Catherine, mentioned during class that she was planning a summer workshop in a small coastal town in North Carolina. "Beaufort is absolute heaven," she enthused. "Historic downtown right on the water, the most gorgeous light for painting, friendly people, reasonable cost of living. I go every summer and fantasize about retiring there someday." Something about her description resonated with me. I'd always loved the ocean but had rarely seen it. A few family vacations when Michael and Ellie were small, before Richard's drinking got bad. The thought of living near water, of falling asleep to the sound of waves, held powerful appeal. That night, I researched Beaufort online. It was indeed charming. A small historic town with colorful cottages, ancient oak trees draped with Spanish moss, a bustling marina. Housing costs were significantly lower than Columbus, and the climate was milder, with short winters and long, warm summers. On impulse, I emailed Catherine and asked for more information about her summer workshop. She responded enthusiastically, attaching a brochure and offering to connect me with a real estate agent friend if I wanted to look at housing options while I was there. 2 weeks later, I was registered for the workshop and had booked a vacation rental for 3 weeks in July. 1 week for the workshop, 2 more to explore the area and determine if it might be a place I could call home. The time between making these decisions and actually leaving for North Carolina passed in a blur of activity. I submitted my official retirement notice. I began sorting through 3 decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to sell, what to donate. I listed my apartment with a realtor, not certain I would sell, but wanting to explore the possibility. Through it all, the ache of Michael's absence remained, but it no longer consumed me. I found myself going hours, sometimes even a full day, without thinking about him or Sophia. When the thoughts did come, they were accompanied by a softer sadness rather than the sharp agony that had initially paralyzed me. July arrived, and with it, my journey to Beaufort. The moment I crossed the bridge onto the island, something inside me relaxed. There was a timeless quality to the town, with its historic buildings and ancient trees, that made my own troubles seem smaller, more manageable. The air smelled of salt and jasmine, and the pace of life was noticeably slower than what I was accustomed to. The watercolor workshop exceeded my expectations. Catherine was a gifted teacher, and the group of 12 students quickly bonded over shared challenges and small triumphs. We painted harbors and salt marshes, weathered boats, and soaring seabirds. My efforts were amateurish compared to some of the more experienced artists, but I found joy in the process, in the way light played on water, in the meditative focus required to translate what I saw onto paper. In the evenings, we gathered for dinners at local restaurants, sharing stories and laughter. For the first time in months, I found myself fully present, engaged in conversation that had nothing to do with my family drama. I was just Margaret, a woman learning to paint, not a rejected mother or excluded grandmother. The workshop ended, but my exploration of Beaufort was just beginning. I met with Catherine's real estate friend, who showed me several properties that might suit my needs and budget. I joined a guided kayaking tour of the salt marshes, surprising myself with my enjoyment of the physical activity. I attended a local art festival, a concert in the park, a historical walking tour of the downtown area. Everywhere I went, I was struck by the friendliness of the people. Strangers started conversations in coffee shops and art galleries. A woman I met at the farmer's market invited me to her book club. The owner of a small art supply store spent an hour helping me select the right materials for a beginner, then invited me to join a weekly painting group that met on his back porch. By the end of my 3 weeks, I had made a decision. I was moving to Beaufort. I found a small cottage for rent just a few blocks from the waterfront, signed a 6-month lease, and returned to Columbus to prepare for the move. The universe seemed to align with my plans. My apartment sold within a week of listing, for slightly above asking price. The probate department at the dental practice arranged a small retirement party, where colleagues expressed genuine sadness at my departure. Even my community garden plot found a new caretaker, a young single mother who was eager to teach her children where food came from. Through it all, I kept Ellie updated, but asked her not to share my plans with Michael. "It's not that I'm keeping secrets," I explained during one of our calls. "It's that my life is no longer his business by his choice, and frankly, I doubt he'd care anyway." She agreed, though I could tell she harbored hope that someday the rift between her brother and me would heal. I appreciated her optimism but couldn't share it. Michael had made his position crystal clear, and continuing to hope for reconciliation would only prolong my pain. The day of my move arrived. The apartment was empty, my possessions either sold, donated, or packed into the small moving truck I'd rented. I stood in the echoing space, memories washing over me. Michael and Ellie doing homework at the kitchen table, holiday gatherings crowded into the small living room, quiet evenings reading in the armchair by the window. This had been my home for over 15 years, the place where I'd rebuilt my life after Richard left, where I'd raised my children to adulthood, where I'd waited in vain for the privilege of knowing my granddaughter. Leaving should have felt more wrenching than it did. Instead, I felt oddly light, as if I were shedding an old skin that no longer fit. I took one final walk through the empty rooms, then closed the door on that chapter of my life. The drive to Beaufort took 2 days. I stopped overnight in Virginia, too tired to continue, but too excited to sleep well. By the time I crossed into North Carolina the following day, anticipation had fully replaced any lingering sadness. This was a beginning, not just an ending. My rented cottage was everything I'd remembered. A small, historic home with heart pine floors, a deep front porch, and a postage stamp garden shaded by a massive oak tree. The landlord, a retired professor, named Henry, met me with keys and a welcome basket filled with local treats and a bottle of wine. "First night in a new place should be celebrated," he said kindly, helping me carry boxes from the truck to the house. "If you need anything, I'm just 2 streets over." Don't hesitate to call, day or night. I spent that first evening sitting on my porch swing, watching the sky turn pink and orange as the sun set behind the live oaks. The air was warm, fragrant with jasmine and salt. From somewhere nearby came the sound of laughter, music, life being lived fully. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt a sense of possibility, of doors opening rather than closing. The following weeks were a whirlwind of settling in and making connections. I joined the waterfront painting group, which met each Wednesday morning to capture the ever-changing light on the harbor. I volunteered at the local historical society, cataloging photographs and documents related to the town's maritime history. I took a part-time job at a bookstore cafe, not because I needed the income, but because I enjoyed the social interaction and the discount on books and coffee. Slowly, my new home took shape around me. I filled it with comfortable furniture, local artwork, plants that thrived in the coastal climate. I planted herbs and flowers in my small garden. I adopted an elderly cat from the local shelter, a dignified orange tabby named Captain, who kept me company on quiet evenings. Fall arrived with milder temperatures and fewer tourists. The rhythm of the town changed, becoming more intimate as summer visitors departed, and only year-round residents remained. My social circle expanded to include a diverse group of friends: artists, retirees, small business owners, teachers from the local school. We gathered for potluck dinners, art shows, community events. I was invited to join a women's kayaking group, a cookbook club, a volunteer organization that maintained the town's historic gardens. For my 60th birthday in October, Ellie flew down to visit. I met her at the small regional airport, and her face lit up when she saw me. "Mom!" she exclaimed, embracing me tightly. "You look amazing! Seriously, you're glowing." "It's probably just sunburn," I joked, but I knew what she meant. I felt different, lighter, more energetic, more at peace. I showed her around my new home, introduced her to my friends, took her kayaking in the salt marshes and painting at the harbor. We spent evenings on my porch, drinking wine and talking about everything and nothing. On her last night, as we sat watching fireflies dance in my garden, she broached the subject that had remained largely untouched during her visit. "Have you heard anything from Michael?" she asked carefully. I shook my head. "Not a word. Have you?" "Occasionally," she admitted. "Brief texts usually. He sent a photo of Sophia on her first birthday. She looks like you around the eyes." The information caused a pang, but a duller one than I would have expected months earlier. "I'm glad he's maintaining contact with you, at least." Ellie hesitated, then said, "I mentioned I was visiting you. He didn't respond." I nodded, unsurprised. "It's okay, Ellie. I've accepted that he's made his choice. I can't force him to want me in his life." "But doesn't it still hurt?" she pressed. I considered the question honestly. "Yes," I said finally. "It hurts. I miss the son I raised. I ache for the granddaughter I'll never know. But the pain isn't consuming anymore. It's just part of my story now, not the whole of it." Ellie studied me thoughtfully. "You really have changed, Mom. Not just on the outside. You seem more, I don't know, centered? Like you finally know who you are apart from being someone's mother." Her observation struck me as profoundly true. I had spent decades defining myself through my relationships to others: daughter, wife, mother. Now, for the first time, I was discovering who Margaret Wilson was at her core. What she enjoyed, what challenged her, what made her feel alive. "I think that's exactly it," I agreed. "I'm finally getting to know myself." After Ellie left, life in Beaufort continued its gentle rhythm. I fell into comfortable routines: morning walks along the harbor, afternoons at the bookstore or volunteering, evenings with friends or at home with Captain and whatever book had captured my interest that week. My paintings improved enough that the local gallery agreed to display a few in their emerging artists section. I didn't sell any, but the recognition boosted my confidence. As Thanksgiving approached, I received invitations from several friends to join their family gatherings. I accepted one from the book club hostess, a gregarious woman named Diana who had become a close friend. Her home was chaotic with children, grandchildren, and various strays she'd adopted into her extended family. I brought a pie and a bottle of wine and found myself welcomed without reservation into their noisy, loving circle. Watching Diana with her grandchildren, reading stories, building block towers, wiping sticky faces, I felt the familiar ache of what I was missing with Sophia. But it was accompanied now by gratitude for what I had found, a community that had embraced me, friendships that nourished me, a life that felt genuinely mine. As we sat around Diana's crowded table, each person sharing something they were thankful for, I realized with surprise that despite everything, I was happy. Not just content, not just getting by, but genuinely happy in a way I hadn't experienced in years, perhaps decades. When my turn came, I raised my glass and said simply, "I'm thankful for new beginnings." The words felt right, true in a bone-deep way. This was indeed a new beginning, unfolding in ways I could never have imagined when my world had seemed to end with Michael's rejection. The path forward wasn't clear, life never is, but for the first time in a very long time, I was eager to discover where it might lead. Winter settled over Beaufort with a gentleness I'd never experienced in Ohio. Instead of biting winds and snowdrifts, we had crisp mornings that mellowed into mild afternoons, occasional rain that washed the town clean, and a crystalline quality to the air that made the harbor shimmer. The tourists had largely departed, and the town had settled into its off-season rhythms, quieter but no less vibrant. I'd decorated my cottage with simple holiday touches, a wreath on the door, candles in the windows, a small potted pine tree that I planned to plant in the garden come spring. The decorations weren't for anyone else's benefit. They were for me, a reminder that celebration was still possible even when life took unexpected turns. Diana had invited me to her family's Christmas Eve dinner, an offer I'd gratefully accepted. My first holiday season without family loomed as a potential emotional minefield, and having somewhere to go, people to be with, felt like a lifeline. The morning of Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold. I'd planned to spend the day baking cookies, to bring to Diana's, then perhaps take a walk along the harbor before getting ready for the evening. But as I poured my first cup of coffee, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I nearly let it go to voicemail. Telemarketers seemed especially active during the holidays. But something compelled me to answer. "Hello? Mrs. Wilson." Woman's voice, professional but warm. "This is Marjorie Lincoln from Coastal Community Legal Services. Do you have a moment to talk?" My first thought was that there must be some mistake. I had no pending legal issues, no reason for a legal service to contact me. "I think you may have the wrong number," I said cautiously. "You are Margaret Wilson, formerly of Columbus, Ohio, mother of Michael Andrews?" The mention of Michael sent a jolt through me. "Yes, that's me. What is this regarding?" "Mrs. Wilson, our organization provides pro bono legal assistance to individuals who cannot afford traditional representation. Your daughter-in-law, Amanda Andrews, has filed for a restraining order against you, claiming harassment and stalking. The hearing is scheduled for January 15th. The world seemed to tilt sideways. A restraining order? For what? I hadn't contacted Michael or Amanda in months, had respected their wishes completely despite the pain it caused me. "This must be some mistake," I managed to say, my voice faint even to my own ears. "I haven't attempted to contact my son or his family since he explicitly asked me not to. According to the filing, Mrs. Andrews claims you've been sending gifts to their home, attempting to make contact with their daughter through third parties, and monitoring their social media accounts through fake profiles. That's absolutely untrue, I said, anger beginning to replace shock. I haven't sent anything to their home since a birthday gift for Sophia months ago, which was returned unopened. I don't use social media at all, let alone create fake profiles. And I certainly haven't tried to contact Sophia through anyone else. There was a pause, then Ms. Lincoln said, "I believe you, Mrs. Wilson. That's why I'm calling. These sorts of false allegations in family disputes are unfortunately common, especially when one party wants to solidify their control or prevent future reconciliation. If the restraining order is granted, you would be legally prohibited from contacting not only your son and his wife, but also your granddaughter, possibly for years." My heart raced, panic rising. What can I do? You need legal representation at the hearing. Someone to present your side, challenge their evidence, and hopefully get the case dismissed. That's where we come in. Our organization has a program specifically for grandparents facing alienation from grandchildren. If you qualify financially, we can represent you at no cost. I took a deep breath, trying to process this sudden, unexpected attack. For months, I'd been quietly rebuilding my life, finding new purpose and joy in Beaufort. I'd respected Michael's boundaries completely, however painful that had been. And now this, a legal maneuver that felt calculated to ensure I could never be part of Sophia's life, even if Michael eventually had a change of heart. Why would Amanda do this now? I wondered aloud. We haven't had any contact in months. It's hard to say without knowing the specifics of your situation, Ms. Lincoln replied. Sometimes these actions are triggered by fear that the estranged family member might reach out again in the future. Sometimes they're about control within the immediate family. Without speaking to your son and daughter-in-law, I can only speculate. I thought of Dr. Foster's email, his observation that Michael had begun questioning Caroline's medical decisions, showing small signs of independence. Could that be connected? Was Amanda afraid Michael might eventually want to reconcile and taking preemptive action to prevent it? What happens if I don't contest this? I asked. The court will likely grant the restraining order by default. Once in place, these orders can be difficult to overturn, and any violation, even an accidental one, could result in criminal charges against you. The reality of the situation settled over me like a physical weight. After everything I'd been through, after all the grief and loss I'd processed, after finally beginning to build a life that wasn't defined by my relationship with Michael, this new threat felt almost unbearable. But beneath the initial panic, something else stirred. Resolve. I had spent my entire life accommodating others, putting their needs and comfort above my own. I had stepped back from Michael's life when he demanded it, swallowed my hurt when he excluded me from Sophia's birth and early months, respected his wishes even when they broke my heart. But this, a legal action based on false allegations designed to permanently sever any possibility of future relationship, this was a line I could not allow to be crossed unchallenged. I want to fight this, I said firmly. What do you need? From me? Excellent, Ms. Lincoln said, and I could hear the approval in her voice. First, I'll need to confirm your financial eligibility for our services. Then we'll need to document your side of the story in detail. All contacts or attempted contacts with your son's family. Any witnesses who can corroborate your account. Evidence that contradicts their claims. We spent the next hour going through the necessary paperwork and preliminary information. By the time we hung up, I had an appointment to meet with Ms. Lincoln in person the following week, a list of documents to gather, and a clearer understanding of what I was facing. I sat at my kitchen table long after the call ended, my coffee gone cold, Christmas cookies forgotten. The peace I had fought so hard to find over these past months felt suddenly precarious, threatened by this unexpected attack. Part of me wanted to retreat, to withdraw the way I had when Michael first cut me off. It would be easier in some ways to simply let the restraining order go unchallenged. To accept that this final, legal severing of ties was inevitable, and continue focusing on my new life in Beaufort. But another part of me, a stronger part that had been slowly emerging since I moved to this coastal town, refused to be falsely accused without defending myself. This wasn't about forcing my way back into Michael and Sophia's lives. It was about standing up for the truth, about not allowing Amanda's manipulations to go unchallenged, about preserving the possibility, however remote, of future reconciliation. With new resolve, I picked up my phone again and called Ellie. She needed to know what was happening, and I needed her support now more than ever. The weeks leading up to the hearing passed in a blur of legal preparation. I met with Marjorie Lincoln at her modest office in a neighboring town, bringing every scrap of documentation I could find. Phone records showing I hadn't called Michael or Amanda, bank statements proving I hadn't sent packages or gifts, affidavits from friends in Beaufort who could testify to my whereabouts and activities over the past months. Ms. Lincoln, Marjorie as she insisted I call her, reviewed everything meticulously, her expression growing increasingly determined as the falseness of Amanda's claims became evident. "They have no case," she said finally, setting down the last document. "No evidence whatsoever to support these allegations. The question is why they're doing this at all, knowing their claims can't be substantiated." I had been wondering the same thing. Could it be just to harass me? To cause me emotional distress? Marjorie shook her head. That would be a lot of trouble and expense for very little gain. "No, I think there's something else going on here. Something that's made them desperate to ensure you have no legal right to contact your granddaughter, now or in the future." "Like what?" "I'm not sure yet," she admitted, "but rest assured, we'll find out." As the hearing date approached, Ellie flew in from Seattle to support me. Her presence was a comfort I hadn't realized how desperately I needed. She stayed in my guest room, accompanying me to meetings with Marjorie, helping me organize my documentation, and providing a steady shoulder to lean on when the stress became overwhelming. "I can't believe Amanda would do this," she fumed one evening as we sat on my porch, watching the winter sunset paint the harbor in shades of gold and crimson. "Actually, no, I can believe it. She's always been manipulative. But Michael going along with it? Filing false legal claims? That's a new low, even for him." "We don't know for sure that he's involved," I pointed out, though I had my doubts. "The filing is in Amanda's name." Ellie snorted. "He's allowing it to happen. That makes him complicit." I couldn't argue with her logic, yet something about the situation still felt off. The Michael I had raised, for all his recent coldness, had always valued honesty and integrity. Filing demonstrably false legal claims seemed out of character, even allowing for Amanda's influence. The night before the hearing, unable to sleep despite exhaustion, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Images of Michael as a child, as a teenager, as a young man starting medical school. His smile, so open and genuine. His eyes, so like my own. Where had that person gone? What had happened to the son who once called me his rock, his safe harbor? A text from Marjorie interrupted my thoughts. "New development. Call me ASAP." Despite the late hour, I dialed immediately. "Margaret," she answered without preamble. "I've just received some interesting information. A colleague at the courthouse noticed Amanda's filing and recognized your name from a different case. A petition for emergency temporary guardianship of a minor child." "Guardianship? I don't understand." "Amanda has filed for emergency guardianship of Sophia, naming only her parents as alternate guardians in the event of her incapacitation." "But Michael is Sophia's father. Why would she need to establish guardianship?" "Exactly," Marjorie said, a note of triumph in her voice. "The only reason to file such a petition would be if Michael is, for some reason, unable to take custody of his own child." And guess what else my colleague discovered? Michael was admitted to University Hospital in Columbus 3 weeks ago. He's still there. The information hit me like a physical blow. Michael, hospitalized for 3 weeks. What could possibly be wrong? And why hadn't anyone told me? Do we know why he's there? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No details. Yet. Medical privacy laws prevent us from accessing that information directly, but the timing of these legal filings, coming right after his hospitalization, suggests it's something serious. Serious enough that Amanda is making arrangements for Sophia's care that specifically exclude you. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. An accident? A sudden illness? Something life-threatening? I need to go to Columbus, I said, already mentally packing a bag. I need to find out what's going on. I thought, you might say that, Marjorie replied. That's why I've already filed a motion to postpone tomorrow's hearing. Given these new circumstances, I believe the judge will grant it. In the meantime, yes, go to Columbus. Find out what's happening with your son. But Margaret, be careful. Amanda has already shown she's willing to use legal means to keep you away. Don't give her any ammunition. I understand, I assured her. I won't try to contact them directly. I just need to know if Michael is all right. After hanging up, I immediately called Ellie, who was staying at a nearby hotel. Despite the late hour, she answered on the first ring. Mom, what's wrong? I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though my voice shook with worry and barely suppressed tears. I'll book our flights, she said without hesitation. We can be in Columbus by tomorrow afternoon. Ellie, you don't have to. Don't even try, Mom. I'm coming with you. Now get some sleep. We've got a long day ahead. Sleep, of course, was impossible. I spent the night alternating between packing, checking flight options, and staring at my phone as if it might suddenly provide answers about Michael's condition. By the time Ellie arrived at my cottage early the next morning, I was operating on pure adrenaline and fear. You look terrible, she said bluntly, taking my suitcase. Did you sleep at all? Not really, I admitted. How could I? Michael's in the hospital with something serious enough that Amanda is filing emergency guardianship papers, and none of us know why. We'll find out soon, Ellie promised, guiding me to her rental car. One step at a time. The journey to Columbus passed in a blur of airports, rental car counters, and highways. Throughout, Ellie maintained a steady stream of conversation, trying to keep me grounded in the present rather than spiraling into worst-case scenarios about Michael. I was grateful for her presence, her practical efficiency, her unwavering support. By late afternoon, we were checked into a hotel near the hospital, preparing our approach. We had agreed that Ellie would go in first to gather information. As Michael's sister, she might be able to access details that would be withheld from me, especially if Amanda had specifically restricted my visiting privileges. What if they won't tell me anything either? Ellie worried as she prepared to leave. What if Amanda has blocked all family contact? Then we'll figure something else out, I said, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. One step at a time, right? She nodded, gave me a quick hug, and left, promising to call as soon as she learned anything. The next 2 hours were among the longest of my life. I paced the hotel room, watching my phone, jumping at every noise in the hallway. When it finally rang, I nearly dropped it in my haste to answer. Ellie? What did you find out? Mom. Her voice was tight, controlled in a way that instantly alarmed me. Michael has leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia. He was diagnosed 3 weeks ago and has been undergoing intensive chemotherapy. The world seemed to stop. Leukemia. My son. My Michael. How serious is it? I managed to ask, though I already knew the answer. Acute myeloid leukemia was aggressive, devastating. It's serious, Ellie confirmed, her voice breaking slightly. The doctors are doing everything they can, but he needs a bone marrow transplant. They're testing potential donors now. I've already given a sample to see if I'm a match. I need to be tested too, I said immediately. Parents are often compatible donors. I told them that. They're expecting you tomorrow morning at the oncology clinic. She paused, then added, Mom, I saw him. Just briefly. Amanda wasn't there. Apparently she was at home with Sophia. He looks thin, tired, but he was awake, talking. He seemed surprised to see me. Did you tell him I'm here? A brief hesitation. No, I wasn't sure how he'd react and I didn't want to upset him. The doctors say keeping his stress levels down is important right now. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. You did the right thing. What about Amanda? Does she know you're there? I don't think so. The nurse mentioned she usually comes in the mornings, stays until early afternoon, then goes home to be with Sophia when she gets back from preschool. Preschool. My granddaughter, whom I'd never met, was old enough for preschool. The realization was a fresh ache on top of the overwhelming fear for Michael. So she'll likely be there tomorrow when I go for testing, I observed. Probably, Ellie agreed. Are you sure you want to do this, Mom? I could talk to the doctors, explain the situation, see if they could schedule your testing for a time when Amanda won't be there. I considered the option. It would certainly be easier to avoid a confrontation with Amanda, especially given the restraining order she was seeking against me. But the thought of delaying even by a day when Michael was so critically ill was unbearable. No, I decided. I need to do this as soon as possible. If Amanda is there, I'll deal with it. Okay, Ellie said, though she sounded dubious. I'm heading back to the hotel now. We can talk more when I get there. That night, Ellie and I strategized how to handle the potential encounter with Amanda, how to approach the medical staff, what to do if Amanda tried to prevent my testing. Through it all, the reality of Michael's diagnosis hovered like a dark cloud, occasionally breaking through our practical planning to hit me with fresh waves of fear and grief. He can't die, I whispered at one point, the words escaping before. I could stop them. Ellie, I can't lose him like this. She moved to sit beside me on the bed, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. He's getting the best care possible. And now he'll have both of us as potential donors. We're going to get through this, Mom. All of us. I nodded, trying to absorb her confidence, her certainty. But as I finally drifted into an exhausted sleep, one thought kept circling in my mind. What if I never got the chance to make things right with my son? Morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. I dressed with care, choosing clothes that were simple but put together, a pair of navy slacks, a soft gray sweater, low-heeled boots. My appearance shouldn't matter, yet somehow it did. I wanted to look like myself, the mother Michael had known all his life, not the shattered woman I'd been when he cut me off, nor the emerging artist I'd become in Beaufort. Ellie and I arrived at the hospital by 8:30, navigating the maze of corridors to the oncology department. The testing process itself was straightforward: paperwork, a detailed medical history, a simple blood draw. The nurse who processed me was efficient and kind, explaining that results would take several days, but promising to expedite them given the urgency of Michael's situation. Throughout the procedure, I kept expecting Amanda to appear, to demand I leave, to create a scene. But the minutes ticked by without incident, and soon I was done. A small bandage on the inside of my elbow, the only evidence of my donation. That's it? I asked the nurse, surprised by the simplicity of a process that could potentially save my son's life. That's it for now, she confirmed. If you're a match, there will be additional steps, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. She hesitated, then added gently, Your son is in room 412 if you'd like to see him. I understand there have been some family complications. But speaking as someone who's worked with cancer patients for 15 years, reconciliation can be powerful medicine. I stared at her, caught between desperate longing to see Michael and fear of how he might react. Is he alone right now? She nodded. His wife just left to make a phone call, probably checking on their little girl. The opportunity seemed like a sign, a brief window that might not come again. Thank you, I said, gathering my purse and jacket. Which way is 412? She pointed down the hallway, her eyes kind. End of the corridor, turn right. And Mrs. Wilson, good luck. The walk to Michael's room felt both endless and too short. Each step brought me closer to a confrontation I'd both longed for and dreaded. What would I say? How would he respond? Would he order me to leave or worse, call security to remove me? Before I could fully prepare myself, I was there, standing outside room 412, the door partially open. Through the gap, I could see a hospital bed, medical equipment, the edge of a window where winter sunlight streamed in. Taking a deep breath, I knocked softly. Come in, called a voice that, despite its weakness, was unmistakably Michael's. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. And there he was, my son, my firstborn, the child I had raised and loved and lost. The sight of him was a physical shock. He had always been robust, athletic, full of restless energy. The man in the hospital bed was gaunt, his complexion gray beneath a hospital tan, dark circles emphasizing the hollows under his eyes. His thick dark hair, so like mine at his age, was gone, leaving his scalp bare and vulnerable looking. His arms, resting atop the blankets, were thin, marked with bruises and IV sites. For a moment, he didn't recognize me, his gaze confused, as he tried to place the woman standing in his doorway. Then awareness dawned, his eyes widening. "Mom?" he whispered, disbelief evident in his voice. "Hello, Michael," I said softly, remaining by the door, uncertain of my welcome. "Ellie told me you were ill. I came as soon as I heard." He continued to stare at me, a complex series of emotions crossing his face. Surprise, confusion, what might have been relief before wariness replaced it. "Does Amanda know you're here?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "I came to be tested as a donor. The nurse just took my blood sample." He nodded slightly, still watching me with that guarded expression. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." I disagreed gently. "You're my son, Michael. Whatever has happened between us doesn't change that." A long silence followed, heavy with unspoken words and painful history. I remained where I was, unwilling to come closer without invitation, afraid of pushing too hard and losing this fragile moment of connection. Finally, Michael spoke again, his voice barely audible. "I didn't want you to see me like this." The simple statement broke something inside me. I moved to his bedside, caution forgotten, maternal instinct overriding everything else. "Oh, Michael," I said, fighting back tears. "Did you think it would matter to me? That I would see you differently, love you less?" He looked away, but not before I saw the moisture gathering in his eyes. "You don't understand. It wasn't just that. It was everything. The way things ended between us. The things I said to you." I took his hand carefully, mindful of the IV line. "None of that matters now." "It does," he insisted, turning back to me. "I was cruel, Mom. Unfair. I let Amanda and her family dictate terms that hurt you deeply. And now, here you are, ready to help me despite all of it." "That's what parents do," I said simply. "We love our children even when it's hard, even when it hurts." Michael's composure finally broke, tears spilling down his hollow cheeks. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God, Mom, I'm so sorry." I couldn't hold back my own tears any longer. I leaned forward, gently gathering my son in my arms for the first time in over a year. He felt smaller, frailer than I remembered, but the essential Michael was still there in the way he leaned into my embrace, the familiar scent of him beneath the hospital, antiseptic, the sound of his breathing. "It's all right," I murmured, stroking his back as I had when he was small. "We're going to get through this." We stayed that way for several minutes, both crying, both beginning the delicate process of finding our way back to each other. When we finally separated, Michael wiped his eyes with the corner of his hospital blanket, looking both exhausted and somehow lighter. "There's so much I need to tell you," he said. "So much to explain." "We have time," I assured him, though I wasn't entirely certain that was true, given the severity of his diagnosis. "Right now, the most important thing is your treatment." He nodded, then glanced toward the door, his expression tensing. "Amanda will be back soon. She won't. This will be difficult for her." The understatement nearly made me laugh despite the seriousness of the situation. "Michael, she's filed for a restraining order against me, claiming I've been stalking her and Sophia. And apparently, she's seeking emergency guardianship of Sophia that specifically excludes me." His face registered genuine shock. "What? No, that can't be right. She wouldn't do that without telling me." "I'm afraid she has," I said gently. "My lawyer confirmed it. The restraining order hearing was supposed to be today, but it's been postponed now that we know about your illness." Michael closed his eyes briefly, a pained expression crossing his face. "I've been so out of it with the chemo, the medications. She must have thought." He trailed off, then opened his eyes, looking at me directly. "I never authorized any legal action against you, Mom. You have to believe that." "I do," I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. Despite everything, I knew Michael wouldn't have approved such a drastic step, especially based on false allegations. "I need to talk to her," he said, reaching for the call button. "Before she comes back and finds you here. She'll be upset, but we can work through this. She's been under tremendous stress with my diagnosis, caring for Sophia alone, worrying about the future." While I understood his impulse to defend his wife, to attribute her actions to the strain of his illness, I couldn't help but notice the pattern. Even now, even after acknowledging his own mistreatment of me, Michael was quick to make excuses for Amanda's behavior, to assume the best of her intentions. Before I could respond, the door swung open, and Amanda herself walked in, her attention focused on her phone. "Michael, your mother called and—" She looked up, froze when she saw me, her face draining of color before flushing with anger. "What are you doing here? How dare you come into my husband's room when you know you're not welcome?" "Amanda," Michael said, his voice surprisingly firm despite his weakened state. "I need you to listen. Mom is here because Ellie told her about my diagnosis. She's just been tested as a potential bone marrow donor." Amanda's gaze flickered between us, her expression hardening. "We already have potential donors. Ellie, my parents, the National Registry. We don't need her." "She's my mother," Michael replied, a note of steel entering his voice that I hadn't heard in years. "And she's here because I need all the support I can get right now, all the potential donors we can find." "After everything she's done?" Amanda demanded, her voice rising. "The way she's tried to interfere, to undermine our parenting decisions, to insert herself where she isn't wanted?" "What exactly has she done, Amanda?" Michael asked quietly. "Because from what Mom just told me, you've filed legal actions against her without my knowledge or consent. Actions based on claims that don't appear to be true." Amanda's expression shifted from anger to a calculated vulnerability that raised my hackles. "You've been so sick, Michael. I didn't want to burden you with this. But your mother has been sending packages to the house, trying to contact Sophia through her preschool, watching our social media through fake accounts. I was frightened for our daughter's safety." "That's not true," I said, keeping my voice calm despite my rising indignation. I haven't contacted or attempted to contact you, Michael, or Sophia in any way since Michael explicitly asked me not to. I don't use social media at all, let alone create fake accounts to monitor yours. And I certainly never tried to reach Sophia through her preschool. Michael looked between us, conflict evident in his tired face. Amanda, is there any actual evidence of these things you're claiming? Her hesitation was brief but telling. I don't need evidence. I know what's happening. I can feel it. She's obsessed with taking Sophia away from me. That's absurd, I said, unable to contain my frustration any longer. I have never wanted anything except to have a normal, loving relationship with my granddaughter. To be allowed to know her, to be part of her life in whatever way you both felt comfortable with. See? Amanda said to Michael, gesturing at me dismissively. She's doing it right now, manipulating you, making herself the victim when she's the one who's been stalking us. Michael closed his eyes briefly, his face etched with exhaustion beyond the physical. When he opened them again, there was a clarity in his gaze I hadn't seen since I entered the room. Amanda, he said quietly, I need you to withdraw the restraining order filing and the guardianship petition that excludes my mother. Her face registered shock, then a quick calculation. You're not thinking clearly, Michael. The medications, the chemo, they're affecting your judgment. We can talk about this when you're feeling better. My judgment is perfectly clear, he countered. And what I see is that you've taken actions, serious legal actions, without consulting me, based on allegations you can't substantiate. That stops now. The certainty in his voice seemed to startle Amanda. She glanced at me, then back at Michael, her expression hardening. I'm trying to protect our family, she insisted. Your mother has never respected our boundaries, never accepted that we make the decisions about Sophia. What boundaries specifically has she violated? Michael asked. Because from where I'm sitting, she's done exactly what we asked. Stayed away, not contacted us, even though it must have been incredibly painful for her. Amanda opened her mouth, closed it again, clearly searching for examples that didn't exist. She's here now, isn't she? Violating your privacy when you're at your most vulnerable. She's here, Michael said evenly, because I'm seriously ill and need a bone marrow donor. Because unlike you, she thought my medical needs might outweigh past disagreements. The implicit criticism wasn't lost on Amanda. Her face flushed again, this time with embarrassment rather than anger. That's not fair. I've been by your side every day since your diagnosis. I've been managing everything, the house, Sophia, your medical care, while you've been too sick to even notice. I know you have, Michael acknowledged, his tone softening slightly. And I'm grateful. But that doesn't justify filing false legal claims, Amanda. It doesn't justify trying to permanently cut my mother out of our lives based on accusations you've invented. She stared at him for a long moment, then turned to me, her expression coldly composed. You think you've won, don't you? Swooping in when he's vulnerable, playing the devoted mother, turning him against me? This isn't about winning or losing, I said, matching her calm tone. It's about doing what's right for Michael, for Sophia, for all of us. You don't get to decide what's right for my daughter, Amanda snapped. No, I don't, I agreed. But neither do you get to decide unilaterally that Michael's mother should be legally barred from any contact with her granddaughter based on false allegations. That's not protection, Amanda. That's control. Before she could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. Is everything all right in here? Mr. Andrews, your heart rate is elevated. You need to stay calm. Michael nodded, visibly trying to compose himself. We're fine, just a family discussion. The nurse looked skeptical but nodded. Try to keep it calm, please. Stress isn't good for your recovery. She glanced meaningfully at Amanda and me before leaving. In the silence that followed, Amanda's demeanor shifted again, moving from defensive anger to a more calculated approach. "Michael," she said softly, moving to his bedside and taking his hand, the one I wasn't holding. "I only wanted to protect our family. If you think I've overreacted, I'll withdraw the filings, but please understand why I felt threatened." It was a masterful performance, and for a moment I feared Michael would fall back into old patterns, accepting her version of events, choosing the path of least resistance. But something had changed. Whether it was the gravity of his illness, the shock of learning what Amanda had done behind his back, or simply the natural evolution of his own thinking, Michael seemed to be seeing his wife with clearer eyes than before. "I appreciate that," he said carefully. "And yes, I'd like you to withdraw the filings immediately. As for the rest, my relationship with my mother, her relationship with Sophia, we can discuss that when I'm feeling stronger. But Amanda, I need you to understand something very important. My mother is part of my family, part of Sophia's family. That's not negotiable anymore." Amanda's expression tightened briefly before she controlled it, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, darling. Whatever you think is best. I'll call the lawyer today." The capitulation seemed too easy, too complete. But before I could voice my skepticism, Michael's monitor began beeping rapidly, and he grimaced, pressing a hand to his stomach. "Michael?" I said, alarmed by his sudden pallor. "It's okay," he managed, though his face contradicted his words. "Just a side effect of the chemo. Happens sometimes." The nurse reappeared, moving briskly to check his vital signs. "Nausea again?" she asked sympathetically. At his nod, she prepared an injection for his IV line. "This should help. Try to rest now." The nurse looked pointedly at Amanda and me. "I think Mr. Andrews needs some quiet time. Perhaps you could both continue your discussion later?" Amanda gathered her purse, clearly relieved by the interruption. "I'll be back this evening," she told Michael, kissing his forehead before turning to leave, deliberately avoiding eye contact with me. I squeezed Michael's hand gently. "Rest now. We'll talk more when you're feeling stronger." He nodded, already drifting under the influence of the medication. "Promise you'll come back?" he whispered, suddenly sounding like the little boy who once feared I'd leave during thunderstorms. "I promise," I assured him, my heart full. "I'll be right here whenever you need me." In the hallway, Amanda was waiting, her composure restored. "This doesn't change anything," she said coldly. "Michael is very sick, very vulnerable. He's not thinking clearly." "He seemed perfectly clear to me," I replied. "But you're right about one thing. He is vulnerable, which is why I won't engage in this fight with you right now. His recovery is all that matters." Something flickered in her eyes, respect perhaps, or surprise at my restraint. "Fine. Truce for now. But don't think this means I'm welcoming you back with open arms." "I don't expect that," I said honestly. "I just want to help my son heal. And someday, I hope to know my granddaughter." She nodded curtly and walked away, leaving me alone in the sterile hospital corridor, processing the whirlwind of the past hour. 3 weeks later, the test results confirmed what I had somehow known all along. I was a perfect match for Michael's bone marrow transplant. The procedure was scheduled quickly, and though the process was uncomfortable, I would have endured far worse to save my son. The day Michael received my cells, I sat beside his bed, watching the life-giving fluid drip into his veins, feeling a connection that transcended our year of estrangement. We had begun the difficult work of rebuilding our relationship, having honest conversations about the past, his feelings of abandonment during his childhood when I worked multiple jobs, my hurt when he allowed Amanda's family to exclude me, the ways we had both failed each other. Amanda maintained a cautious distance, civil but cool. She had withdrawn the legal filings as promised, but remained skeptical of my intentions. I understood her fear of losing control, of having her authority as Sophia's mother questioned. I didn't push, knowing trust would take time to rebuild, if it ever could be. 6 months passed. Michael's cancer responded well to treatment, though the road to full recovery stretched ahead. I had rented a small apartment in Columbus, dividing my time between Ohio and Beaufort, determined to support my son while maintaining the independent life I'd built. Then came the day that changed everything. I arrived at Michael's house for my weekly visit to find him sitting on the front porch, looking stronger than I'd seen him since before his diagnosis. Beside him, a small dark-haired girl peeked out, from behind a picture book regarding me with curious eyes. Michael's eyes. "Mom," Michael said, smiling. "There's someone I'd like you to meet. This is Sophia." My granddaughter studied me solemnly, then held out her book. "Daddy says you're my grandma. Do you like dragons?" I climbed the steps slowly, heart pounding, and sat beside her. "I love dragons," I said, voice steady despite my emotions, especially friendly ones. She nodded approvingly and began explaining the story in great detail, completely unaware of the miracle this moment represented. Over her head, I met Michael's gaze, saw the understanding there, the acknowledgement of how close we'd come to losing this forever. "Thank you," I mouthed silently. He smiled, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "No, Mom. Thank you for never giving up. On me. On us." As Sophia continued her animated explanation of dragon behavior, I realized that sometimes the greatest acts of love aren't the dramatic gestures, but the quiet persistence of showing up, of remaining open to reconciliation, even when it seems impossible. My journey wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead. Amanda's continued wariness, the delicate balance of grandparent boundaries, the uncertainty of Michael's health. But sitting there on that autumn porch, my son beside me, my granddaughter's small voice filling the air with wonder, I knew with absolute certainty that every painful step had led exactly where I needed to be. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of my cottage in Beaufort, watching the sunset paint the harbor in shades of gold and crimson. Michael, now in remission, lounged in an Adirondack chair nearby, his strength steadily returning. Sophia chased fireflies across the lawn with Ellie, her delighted squeals carrying on the evening breeze. "She loves it here," Michael observed, smiling as his daughter captured a glowing insect between cupped palms, her face alight with wonder. "The ocean works magic on children," I replied. "You were the same way at her age." This visit marked a milestone, the first time Michael had brought Sophia to Beaufort without Amanda. Their marriage had weathered Michael's illness but remained strained. They were in counseling, working through issues that had festered long before I re-entered their lives. "Mom," Michael said quietly, "I've been thinking about what you said last month, about starting over. During our gradual reconciliation, I'd shared my journey with him, how losing him had forced me to rediscover myself, to build a life centered on my own needs and interests rather than defining myself solely as someone's mother." "What about it?" I asked, curious about the thoughtful expression on his face. "I think I need to do something similar. Start fresh professionally." "You're considering leaving medicine?" The possibility surprised me. Michael's identity had been so tied to his career as a surgeon. He nodded. "The cancer changed everything, made me reassess what matters." He gestured toward Sophia. "I don't want to miss her childhood because I'm constantly at the hospital. And honestly, I don't think I can go back to that environment where Caroline has so much influence, where everything is political." "What would you do instead?" "There's a rural health clinic about 30 minutes from here looking for a doctor. General practice, regular hours, serving people who really need help." He hesitated. "I'd be closer to you too." The implications stunned me. "You're thinking of moving to Beaufort?" "Amanda's against it," he admitted, She says it would derail her career, take Sophia away from her parents. But I think... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I think some distance from her family might be healthy for all of us. I remained silent, not wanting to influence a decision that could further strain his marriage. Yet my heart raced at the possibility of having my son and granddaughter nearby. Whatever you decide, I said finally. I support you. Michael smiled. That's new. You giving me space to make my own choices without trying to guide me toward what you think is best. I'm learning, I acknowledged with a chuckle. Slowly, perhaps, but learning. That night, after Michael and Sophia were asleep in the guest rooms, I sat on my porch swing with a cup of tea, reflecting on how dramatically life had changed since that devastating phone call when Michael first cut me off. The pain of that period hadn't vanished entirely. Such wounds never heal without leaving scars. But those scars had strengthened me in unexpected ways, forcing me to discover resilience I hadn't known I possessed. 6 months later, Michael accepted the position at the rural clinic. He and Amanda compromised. They would try living in Beaufort for 1 year before making any permanent decisions. They purchased a house 10 minutes from my cottage, close enough for regular visits but maintaining healthy boundaries. Amanda's initial coldness gradually thawed as she built her own connections. In Beaufort, finding unexpected professional opportunities at the regional hospital. Watching her navigate this transition, I recognized something of myself in her determination to maintain her identity beyond motherhood. Our relationship would never be warm. Too much had happened for that. But we developed a functional respect, based on our shared love for Michael and Sophia. As for my granddaughter, she blossomed in my life like a long-awaited garden. We collected seashells along the beach, made pottery in my small studio, read endless dragon stories on rainy afternoons. Each shared moment felt like a gift I'd once believed forever lost. One evening, as Sophia and I painted watercolors at my kitchen table, she looked up suddenly with those eyes so like Michael's. "Grandma," she said thoughtfully, "Daddy told me you didn't see each other for a long time before I met you. Were you lost?" The innocent question pierced straight to the heart of things. "In a way," I answered carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups lose their way to each other, but the important thing is that we found our way back." She considered this, adding a swirl of blue to her painting. "I'm glad you're not lost anymore." "Me too, sweetheart," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "Me too." Life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. I still divide my time between my pottery, my bookstore job, and my growing circle of friends. Michael's health remains stable, his new medical practice flourishing. Ellie visits often, bringing energy and laughter to our gatherings. Nothing is perfect, nothing is guaranteed. But sitting around my dinner table with my family, a family I once feared permanently broken, I understand the most valuable lesson of this journey. Even the deepest wounds can heal if we remain open to the possibility of reconciliation, of growth, of love finding its way back through whatever darkness separates us. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.